hopefully AJ will be good for tomorrow.
Yeah. Agreed. Ooh, we're gonna call this a silly mess up for the day. The beginning of our video and the beginning of our stream is us being silly and the music starting halfway through. Good thing we can
Perfect.
cut it off in post. You guys will never know. It's magic.
I am so badly missing the Bay Area weather right now.
Mm.
Central AZ where we are, there was like a week of winter, and
Oh
that's
no.
being generous. There was I think it was toward the end of December, where it's like you go outside even in the middle of the day, like okay, it's winter, like you feel the cold air. And now it's in February, which is still supposed to be cold.
Mm.
You go outside in the middle of the day and it feels like the beginning of summer. Now, I know that's probably silly to complain about to most people, but I love seasonal weather. I love the winter and when it's cold and rainy or snowy, depending on where you are. So when I go outside and it's 85 degrees and sunny, I'm not a huge fan. So I'm a little jealous of you guys over there right now.
Yeah, I feel like it goes both ways though, because I can't tell how many people, talk about California and are like, oh yeah, you guys, how's your winter over there? Basically saying that, like hella people are like, oh, you don't even have winter in California. It depends where you are, of course. Where we were in the Bay Area, there is truth to that, but you drive a little bit and you definitely get each season, and you can you can kind of almost get each season depending no matter what time of year it is almost in the Bay Area. But you know Phoenix, it's a whole other beast out there. Phoenix area, I think, right? So larger Phoenix area.
Well, dude, even when people make fun of California about what you just said, it snows literally in the Bay Area, like Mount Diablo or
Yeah.
Diablo and Mount Hamilton. It snows there every year. So, and
Hmm.
that's like literally right in the Bay Area. So it's not that far. And then if you
That's
think,
true.
I don't know, Tahoe, a few hours away, there's some of the snowiest parts in the world there. I think Donner
Right.
Pass is like one of the snowier parts, if not the country, possibly the world. I heard that before. I don't know if I ever looked it up though. But anyways, though, so when people say that, I hear what they're saying, but
Yeah.
that's more like applicable to people that are maybe right on the coast
Yeah.
or something. So you could say the Bay Area is kind of included in that, but I don't know. Regardless, though, the Bay Area does have pretty legit weather.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
Well, it's one
Know
of
what I'm
those
saying?
things where I feel like people definitely it's easy to be like, oh, it's so expensive, but it's like, you know what? Like,
Yeah.
especially as someone who was born and raised here and, has had to very seriously consider leaving. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it would be great to leave, but I ultimately personally would want to come back. So it doesn't really make much sense to leave, even though it would make a lot of sense in the short term potentially. Although even that's less true these days because as we've talked about, places like Boise are getting as expensive as places in the Bay Area, which is insanity.
Yeah. Boise, around the Phoenix area, places in Texas. I'm trying to remember. There's a few others where a lot of people were migrating to,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not quite to that level, but it's really bad. I mean,
Yeah.
it's bad anywhere when a normal you could call it a middle class neighborhood, whatever you want to call it, where the houses are sometimes multi millions of dollars. When
Mm-hmm.
it's not even a new house, it's older, it's normal size, whatever that means, 1,500 square feet, maybe that's normal.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's crazy how that is going to the new normal, unfortunately. And we were just looking. I think it was it Palo Alto. I don't know. My wife and I were just looking online some places around the Bay Area, and I feel like I scrolled upon Palo Alto, and there was like almost no homes for under $2 million,
Yeah.
no matter how small they were. I was like, this is so crazy how expensive it is now.
Well, I mean, tech has just been such an influence on this area for mostly I think good, but there's always bad with the good, and this is certainly that bad that we're talking about, right? Because it's like you can't you can't get a place in this area unless you have more money than like anybody usually can get by the time you need a house to live in. You know what I mean? But basically the people who have the opportunity to move here and buy houses now are folks who have for some reason or another come into money, or either they've made their money or they received their money via family or some kind of thing, but very very much less often is it the people who like it's just harder. It's hard to get a place here, especially for I don't know. I say younger people, but we're in our 30s, so we're not that young.
Yeah, or if someone, say, purchased a home years ago when it wasn't too expensive and,
That's it.
their house appreciated a lot, that's
Yeah.
that's definitely another way. Because I know when we were kids, like, sure, like, there's parts all over the Bay Area, of course, that were expensive, but all the quote unquote middle class neighborhoods, the price equated to middle class. They were just normal price, but that's not the case anymore. Those neighborhoods now, the homes have gone up, tenfold with
Yeah.
how much they're worth, which is just crazy.
And
But I
also
still
good.
miss your weather regardless.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I think I was kind of driving back to ultimately, was to say that I think that I would miss it no matter where I went as well. And certainly, regardless of whether you can afford living here, the one of the you as a generality, whether anyone can afford living here, it's when you consider the weather and the nature, it's like, okay, we could do that,
Yeah. Yeah, okay, maybe I'll spend every last cent I have, with
I
with those things.
I have to say that is the one advantage that someone like myself who was born and raised here has, is I don't have. I mean, I've lived in California my whole life, so it's like even though I recognize how expensive it is, and believe me, I feel it in my wallet at the end of every month, or at the beginning of every month, I should say. I'm accustomed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like one of these things where it's like, oh, is he gonna have a bunch of extra money this week? It's like, no, that's the status quo. I'm not gonna have money. you know?
Just spend it all on rent or mortgages.
Yeah, yeah. If we
Yeah.
food maybe. And that was actually funny thing is I didn't have the intention of bringing it back to the podcast or the subject at hand, but that was what actually kept me from getting really fit for a lot of my life. Was I wasn't in a financial position to afford to be able to eat well. And it's funny because now with experience and knowledge, I recognize that I could have been making better decisions, and there were more factors going into it than just that. But if you don't have enough money to eat the food that it requires to pack on muscle weight, but you're still trying to pack on that, like I would love to have worked out a lot more when I was younger, but I chose not to because I didn't have money to feed me the way that I knew that I needed to eat when I was working out rigorously. Now, here's the reality of that: was I was out drinking, so it was just a matter of where my priorities were going, right? But the bottom line was that I was not able, because of the money that I had allocated for my food,
Yeah.
to really progress physically, especially when it came to strength, because I was lifting. I've always been a weightlifter, but I wasn't building strength. I was maintaining strength more than anything, and then like fueling myself with beer. Frankly, I was a lot of my meals were liquid meals. I was like, oh, I was like, beer's food. 10 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, it is, but like it's not good food or fuel.
But speaking of fitness, so I had a question for you, and I don't know the correct answer, so I want to see what you thought. So I've noticed, of course, there's always going to be trolling on social media, right? We've talked
hmm
about that a lot, but I have noticed a fair amount of even people with PhD, so probably the authority in certain subjects, whatever they're an expert in. I've seen them go into other people's pages, that are presenting maybe false information, or they're manipulating something in some way, which
Mm-hmm.
obviously neither of us like, or no one should like. And they'll go on those pages and leave not the nicest remarks and correct them and all. So I love the, like, the giving the correct information. So my question isn't that, but it's like, should people troll other people if there's good that will come about it? So I'm conflicted, because part of me is like, no, don't go to other people's pages to do that. Use your own platform and spread good information there. But on the same note, when it gets to the point where we've talked about this on the show before, where there's people saying they can cure cancer with their special detox teas and programs, um, that is absolutely insane. So part of me is like, is there that threshold there where people should go and do that? Because I mean, that's like, when it gets to that level, that's pretty serious. Like telling people a little program that you created is going to cure someone's cancer. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like, that's insane. So maybe not necessarily always that, but maybe a middle ground. What do you think? I don't really know the right answer to that.
I kind of think it's one of these things that is never going to necessarily have a right answer, because the way we're looking at it um, is it worth getting pulled into the muck in order to help correct misinformation out there? Is kind of the question that we're asking, right? Because that's what it is ultimately. It's muck in like social media and kind
The
of the
muck,
internet at large. Yeah, it's muck. It's
the
like
muck.
it's like it's like who can fling the most shit the loudest and have the most splash effect, right? So the problem is that when you approach this question with should I engage in trolling in order to correct information, you've already, in my opinion, you've already missed your point. You've already gone past your point, because if your point is really to help proliferate good information, then getting pulled into a potential confrontation, even if it's just an internet confrontation with another person, creates a whole other it creates a whole another spectacle, which is now this fight between these two sources, right? And now the spectacle is this fight and not this information, you know?
Yeah, that's
So,
true. That's a good
so
point.
if you're going and you want to correct, if you really want to correct somebody's misinformation, do what Jake and I are doing here. Start your own um, source of information and have that be, first of all, I would say, as if you were going to do that, make sure it's good information and that everything that you talk about is peer reviewed, based on peer reviewed research, as it is here, or anecdotal and clearly stated as such. But if you really want to proliferate good information, do so by doing that, not by going and breaking down somebody else's information that you don't agree with, even if it's egregious, right? Like, let me say that there is exceptions, and if you are a person who that's your goal, is to go and you know break down these poor messages, rock it, go do it. You know what I'm saying? But that's not really what the question you're asking is. To me, the question you're asking is, should we as professionals get involved at that level, that social media level, to help correct information? And I think the answer is no. I think the answer is you go and you proliferate that good information. And if you have something, like, for an example, we brought up the Liver King in our last episode, and we definitely got to retouch back on Liver King, because I checked it out, as per your request, Jake. But there's and we'll get into whatever about Liver King, but there's some good, and there's a lot of bad, but there's good and bad. And the reality that um is that I lost my train of thought. Anyway, you guys get what I was saying. The idea being that if you want to get good information out there, get good information out there. It doesn't need to be something where
Yeah.
it's a big fight and then people are watching because it's a fight.
I didn't plan on doing that. That's not something I have an interest in. And getting in Twitter arguments or social media is more of like should the people with PhDs or whoever that have
Yeah.
this the highest level of knowledge per se, if they should do it. Because I'm not gonna lie, when I saw a post where that dentist was telling people that fruit is poison to your
Yeah.
body, it did make me happy to see people that knew what they were talking about go on there and
Hmm.
tell him how wrong he was. Like I said, I don't have an interest in arguments on social media or anything, but it was one of those things because it's like, what is the right answer?
Yeah.
But I think I fare more on the side of what you were saying, because it turns into, a lot of times it turns into just a fight, and no one actually listens to each other. It's like just
Exactly.
entertainment at that point. You know what I mean?
Well,
So
and not
it's
only
kind
is
of
it
hard.
just entertainment at that point, but as the person who has the goal of trying to get that good information out there, we just we get caught up in this, like, this ego thing, this ego emotion about how I need to be right and people need to see that I'm right, right? And that's the point where it gets kind of not only unnecessary, but I would argue even kind of a little bit dangerous for the provider who's trying to do good stuff, because if you keep that's a losing battle, trying to correct somebody who's putting out bad information. Because if they're putting out bad information, they're doing it because they probably don't care, and they're doing it for some other purpose. So why are we, you
To
know what I
sell their
mean?
book.
What's that?
To sell their book. That's normally what it is.
And that's exactly what it is. So when we ask that question, and really it becomes this, this person who's putting out the wrong information, what are they being malicious? Or are they're trying to sell their book, trying to put food on their table? And so it's like, when we get to this processing too, it's like, do I need to get vicious as a provider? No, it's like, this person's just trying to put food in their mouth. You know what I mean? It's like, then they're going about it the wrong way, but I'm not the people police. You know what I mean? That said, I do want to note that it's absolutely essential that somebody goes on and says, corrects this information with authority, because, there is a responsibility that I've kind of blown by in my response to this. If you feel a responsibility to get good information out there, I'm not saying don't go do that. I'm just saying, like, what's the point? Someone who's really good with this is Dr. John Berardi. He has mad trolls and he shares that with his social media.
I
And
remember that, yeah.
right. And I don't necessarily agree with everything that John Berardi is saying, but I absolutely agree with the sentiment of it, which is, look, people are gonna talk shit, people are gonna yell, people are gonna scream. Like, you kind of got to do you. You got to make sure that you are proud of what you're doing and what you're saying, and then the rest kind of falls by the side. And if correcting somebody on their social media platform, whether you're a PhD or some other position of authority, if that makes you feel good, and not because you're like breaking somebody down, but it makes you feel good because, like, you're contributing to the world, do it. You know what I'm saying? So that was a bunch of words. That's just about what I think about this thing. That is just kind of my opinion.
Did you see when John Berardi, well, he didn't get an argument, but someone trolled him about a post he made regarding cheese. He
Mm.
mentioned how he eats cheese, or actually, sorry, he doesn't eat cheese. I think he has some.
He's
I
lactose
don't remember what
intolerant, I
issues he
think.
has. Yeah, it's probably lactose intolerant, something like that. But anyways, there was something in his post saying, in moderation, cheese is fine for most people. It was something really stupid like that, right? Not a big deal, but someone got really triggered and just started going off on John Berardi. And then I remember he showed a bunch of the screenshots. He
Hmm.
blocks everyone's name. He doesn't ever
Yeah.
try to like make people look stupid, which is cool. But I did see that one time. But the what made me think of this question was, I see, Lane Norton all the time doing this. And when he does it, I like that he does it because he has a PhD in nutritional sciences. This is like his thing, his craft, his expertise, and he normally will go on people's pages that the ones that are just spewing complete misinformation. You know what I mean? Like, to
Hmm.
sell their book and to get more copies of that sold. The problem though, he almost got his Instagram deleted. I can't remember if it got suspended for a couple days. And I mean, he has, I don't know, over a 500,000 followers, and a lot of his business, I've heard him say, is through Instagram.
Hmm.
And some person was upset that Lane was correcting people, told a bunch of other people on social media, okay, let's all complain about Lane at the same time. Let's report him to Instagram at the same time. They did that, and then someone after however many people did that, someone at Instagram either temporarily shut his account down or suspended it for a small amount of time, something like that. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I think Lane knew someone at Instagram or Facebook or whatever it was, the issue got resolved, but people were that upset and they were seen as bullying, but the way that I saw it wasn't bullying. It was literally correcting misinformation, at the end of the day could lead to people getting hurt depending on what it is, like going back to the example of that person saying they can cure cancer, which that's a whole nother talk. So yeah, that's what made me think of it. But I don't know. I still I I have zero interest, getting into all these arguments online.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten trolled a couple times. I didn't say anything, so I was like, whatever. Like
Yeah,
people are gonna get their attention one way or another. So
that's it. Well, and that's the thing is, we always talk about on this program, think about what people are doing and why. And for the most part, people who are, we kind of use trolling loosely because we're not really talking about trolling. We're talking about going on and correcting information. And the troll, the troll is like the person who's like going on and doing shit like because they want that reaction out of people, right? So like true trolling, it's always going to be around, and there's always going to be bullshit, and they're always going to be, it's always going to be this stuff. So it's like a
yeah,
big part of this question too is just weighing out each individual thing, right? Is it worth it?
yep,
I
yep,
don't know. And the same thing when we're
yep.
working with clients. It's like you might have 30 or 40 things that you want to tell them that's going to help them. Is that really going to be the most useful thing right in that moment? Is to give them 30 or 40 things? No.
Absolutely not.
Like one or two things. Probably just the one. You know what I'm saying? So it's
I'm
the
glad
same
you
thing.
asked me that because I been meaning to ask you on the last couple episodes, and I keep forgetting to bring it up. But I want to hear about the most challenging client that you've had.
Hmm.
Obviously you don't have to use names; you can just general information,
Yeah.
obviously. But I was
Call out this
curious,
one
especially
guy.
I know say his first and last name,
His
his
social
social, his
security.
address. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it got me wondering too, especially because we were talking offline a second ago about some really cool things that happened with one of your clients, and I was wondering, I never asked you about your most challenging, what that's looked like for you.
So I want to start this by saying what Jake and I were talking about is kind of the most and one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in training, which is a client that I work with. He's my longest term client, and I've seen him go through an amazing transition, all body, mind, and spirit in the couple years that I've been with him, and it's been just so, as a trainer, so rewarding and so affirming. That this is what I want to do with my life, is just help people kind of use the tools of fitness to better themselves, right? So, as much as that's an awesome goal, and I knew that I wanted to do that out the bat, um, learning how to do so was crazy challenge. Crazy challenge. And part of the reason was because my first client, and this is my roundabout answer to your question, my first client was also my most challenging.
Oh no way.
Yeah, and like pretty objectively. So I come right out the gate. I had I trained for very brief period of time at 24 Hour Fitness. But I didn't pick up any regular clients while I was there. It was only a few weeks I think it was like 3 weeks that I actually was there. So it really wasn't long. But
Do they sorry to cut you off. I've
mm,
always been meaning to ask this. Do they provide clients for you at 24-hour fitness, or do you have to obtain them on your own?
ooh, we should make an episode about the different ways of training and what they are, because we
Okay.
could launch into a whole thing. Um, they there are leads involved, but
Mm,
my impression
okay.
was that the leads weren't really, like, it was kind of like really your potential client pool were the people who are there. You know what I mean? Because it's like it's the gym floor.
we
You know what I mean? It's like
we
you
could
can
talk about that for a whole episode.
we could,
I have
right? And we
funny
should. It
stories
would be
for
super
you.
fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Sorry, but yeah, you were saying.
So, and actually, I really just even if we just talk about it, even off air, let's talk about it because it is interesting. And I will say that my brief experience at 24 hour fitness was illuminating and taught me all I needed to know about big box systems. And I haven't been back since those 3 weeks. I moved into a private boutique studio and into people. I train people in their homes as well. I go to their I train mobily, and I haven't been back. Yeah, because I won't. It's basically the worst part about big box places is they take like 70% of your money, 65% of your money, something like that. It's massive. And so like you're just constantly caught in there are people who definitely make it work for them, but they've figured out the system. So I can't speak to that. But
And
anyway,
there's a lot of red tape for sure. Obviously, the bigger the organization, most likely there's going to be a lot of red tape and other things you have to deal with, I'm sure. So,
the biggest obstacle I think is that the big box systems are not really set up for fitness. They're set up for sales.
oh
And
my gosh, I love that you just said that. Oh, can you say that again? That was amazing. Just say it one more time. It's soothing to my ears to hear someone say that.
um the big box systems, and this is spoken as somebody who, though I spent a brief time there, I did spend time in the big box system. They're built for sales. They're not built for fitness. They are a space for people who have the knowledge and skills to become fit because you have all this equipment, and they have people in place that can teach you how to do those things, the trainers. But ultimately, it's a system designed to put money in the pockets of the people who own 24 Hour Fitness or whatever, Fitness Express. I don't know. I don't even think Fitness Express is even a place anymore. But 24 Hour Fitness is kind of the name to go to these days. But they're all these big box systems work on the idea that they have low enough monthly fees that they're not really worried about whether you get there. In fact, they're banking on the fact that you're going to buy a membership and not show up because
Yep.
they've got so many
Yep.
memberships per hour that if everybody was actually going to the gym, they wouldn't have enough space. But instead, what they do is they just keep
Yep.
making sales because what people do is so they say $80 a month or whatever, $60 a month to go and have it and go work out. And when you do it, you're like, oh, I'm going to do it. Even if I do it once a month, it'll be worth it, right? The reality is most people are going to go once, not once a month. You know what I mean? And really, anyway, we're going off on this whole tangent. And as we've talked about, listeners, Jake and I are trying to have a more positive light. So on that note, I will say that one of the great things that I really learned from being in this kind of situation where they said I literally had my boss tell me somebody comes in and wants you work and says they want to have bigger biceps, you will do only bicep curls with them. I was like, okay, screw you, guy. You know what I mean? Like that's not
Yeah.
what I'm doing here. And I didn't. I left very quickly. But what I did learn was that the value of fitness and the value of the fitness industry are starkly different things. Because the value of the fitness industry, the really good value of the fitness industry is that it gets good information in front of you. But that's convoluted by a whole bunch of bad that we talk about all the time. That is highlighted by, these big box places being really more sales stuff. So, sorry to bring it back around. You asked me about my most challenging client, though.
The first client you had, yeah.
So this was post this experience, and my first client. When I entered the boutique system, I moved away from 24 Hour Fitness. I moved locations, and I ended up back in the Bay Area, in Pleasanton, California, at Tri Valley Trainer. The first person I started training was a CEO in Livermore, and not that it matters where he was, but the point is he had one of these, like Livermore has a bunch of big warehouses, and he was a CEO of a company with like a big warehouse. So the reason why I share this context is because this guy is dealing in multi-millions of dollars every any given minute he's dealing with multi-millions of dollars. You know what I mean? He's a high earning, high achieving CEO who, um, you know, rubs elbows with the rich and famous. Like, so like, and I'm not like, zero exaggeration here. Like all those things, like literally, he was actually featured on ESPN because he had, regular basketball seats on the floor, and some, I'm not going to say the team or what happened, but there was a big kerfuffle a few years ago, and he was like, the camera was on him because he was floor seats to these really well playing team. Oh shit, I guess I'm just saying Livermore. It's the Warriors. So the Warriors at their height, he's got courtside tickets, right? Again, uh, none of this is important except for the fact that it makes it real intimidating to go into as, go train somebody in, first of all, in their warehouse. He had a gym in his warehouse. So I went into his, office, and I trained him there. But this is like this big CEO guy who's like used to throwing money around and being the boss. And I'm this kid who came in who's like, hi, I'm Clayton. Let's be friends, which is not the approach that, you need with a client like that. A client like that generally speaking, wants you to come in and be like, all right, this is what we're doing. Boom, boom, boom. This is why we're doing it. Boom, boom, boom. When you're first starting out, at least I was not prepared to do that. I came from the other end where I'm like, all right, what do you want to do? What can we do? What do you like doing? And actually that's where I still come from, but I have a lot more experience now. So I do that a lot more effectively now. But you can imagine a young trainer without a super defined strategy mixed with a multi-million dollar CEO who knows exactly what he wants and how he wants it. It was a fight every day for me just to prove to him that I knew what I was talking about, which I did. Because as we've talked about, even though I was a new trainer, I grew up in the business. This is not, we learn new information every day, but for the most part, this is foundational stuff that I've been like working on since I was a kid, right? So I walk into this with lots of knowledge, but you got to, I think, as a, client going with a starting training for the first time, there's a certain amount of trust fall that you have to do. Because the reality is you have to give your trainer the opportunity to show you that they know what's up. And so if you go into it as a client expecting that you know how things are going to go and they're going to go the way you expect them to be, kind of dead on arrival. So I like to think that we got a lot of great stuff done together. I like to think that I taught him, I know I taught him good form because when I walked in, he didn't know how to lift, and he knew how to lift when we left. But some situations are just not right, and that one was right for a while, and then. But I'll tell you what, when he sent me that email, or I think it was a text message, like letting me know that he didn't want to train with me anymore. You'd think that for a lot of people, their first client texting them and saying that they didn't want to continue would be like a big, like, oh no, the first thing I felt was relief. So that should tell you about like kind of what kind of fight that was every day. And I know I kind of danced around the actual things that made it difficult, but that's because you can imagine that kind of tension, between a young, pup and an old, war dog, when the old war dog has got to be the, respect the authority of the young pup. It's a messy game. That said, he did great. And it was still a wonderful experience overall. And I'll tell you what, I learned one, how to deal with a client who's super high achieving, and maybe not in fitness, especially not in fitness, but super high achieving in other parts of their life. And also notice that I am a really good trainer for some people, and I'm really just not the right trainer for other people. And for me, I rely on a lot of self motivation because I don't feel like it's going to do you tons of good for you to find your motivation from me. Granted, there's a little bit of that. That's always going to be a part of it, right? But Anyway, I got lost on a tangent and I got lost on my little story. Apologies for how disjointed that may have sounded because I don't know how all that sounded, but um, yeah, it was an interesting thing, and it's funny because now as we're talking about that experience versus the one that you and I were actually talking about, which is my favorite experience as a trainer, it's really just shows the contrast, you know.
Was he the person I'm picturing? Obviously, I have no idea who this is. Did they not want to take instruction? Did they try to lead in everything that was happening?
He was actually a really good student.
Hmm.
He didn't want to be there.
Oh, okay,
You know what I mean?
gotcha.
He didn't want to be there. He didn't want. I think if I had been more experienced and more authoritative, I think he wanted me to be more experienced and more authoritative, because I think if I'd been more experienced and more authoritative, he would have wanted to be there more. Because in retrospect, I think he was just somebody that I just needed to tell what to do, and I was kind of figuring out how to do that still as a trainer. You know, I come from a place where I want my client to tell me what they want to do, but I'm experienced enough now to know that if they don't want to tell me, then I'm fine. I'll give you plenty of stuff to do and we'll make it work. And then eventually you'll tell me what you like, even if it's not verbally, because I'll see in your face when I say, hey, it's time to do some rows. You know, if someone hates rows, your trainer, if they're paying attention, they're gonna know. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
as well, as long as you express that, right? Because some people are super stoic. So obviously, you know.
Well, let's get into the fitness focus today. We're already talking a little bit of fitness, so I'm stoked to talk about this. And this was we'll start by kicking this off with Andrew Coates's post he made the other day. I even messaged him and said how great it was and that we were going to be talking about it on the show because I liked
Yeah,
it so much.
it's a
And
great one.
I'm going to do a little overview. I'm not reading his post. This is more from memory. But he made a post saying something along the lines of like, I'm proud of all the people that get their weekend personal training certifications and blah, blah, blah. Something like that. Just saying basically, if you're a brand new trainer, even if the course that you took was really short, those people are still great. And when I went to read the caption, it was very long and it wasn't at all what I thought it was going to be about by just reading the little graphic right there. But basically, he was talking about the elitism attitude that people have in the fitness space. And what he was saying was it's so easy for people to bash on that brand new trainer that just got his or her cert that weekend, that doesn't know much. And he started breaking it down saying it is the responsibility of someone that's been a trainer longer to help and coach and mentor the people that just got those weekend certifications. And I just thought that was such a great thing to say, not just in the context of fitness, but anywhere in life too. And I really believe that too, especially in the workplace. To me, if even if it's not your title, I strongly believe if you've been there longer, it is your responsibility to train and mentor a newer person because you were once new. So I actually kind of saw the post that way, not necessarily just in fitness, but when he said that, it like sparked something in me. I was like, man, this is so great. We're gonna have to talk about this. You can even apply this to if you're in the gym and you're someone that makes fun of someone that's new because they might not know what they're doing yet in the gym. Instead of doing that, going over there and helping them if they're in obvious need, I think that would be the better route to go. So, Andrew Coates, if you do get to listen to this episode, that was a fantastic post, and you've been putting out some awesome content.
Yeah.
You really have. And it's funny. I told Andrew this the other day too, that almost every day I see on someone else's story someone resharing Andrew's stuff.
Yeah.
So he's just kind of on fire with his content. And he
He
keeps it
is.
real. So we are for sure gonna have to have him back as a guest because I had him on a little bit before you came on the show, and he is just a great critically thinking, just compassionate and intelligent, trainer that keeps it real and just puts out great stuff. So love the post. Did you? Clayton, I think you told me you saw the post, or am I not remembering
Yeah,
that correctly?
there's been like three, and I think Andrew Coates has been the one that this has happened with the most. But Jake and I follow some of the same people, some different people, and it's happened more than once. I think that I've sent you stuff, or you've sent me. No, usually I think maybe it was just the one time, but I send you stuff and you're like, oh yeah, I saw this one. Oh, you know what's happened actually? There's been multiple times where I think it's been Andrew Coates stuff where I almost sent you stuff, and then I happen to see that on the Mission Driven Made you had on IG
Yep.
you had reposted it already.
Yep.
So it's funny because as I'm
Yep.
talking about and processing this, this has happened on my end more times than you even know because I'll see stuff and I'll be like, oh, so good. And Andrew Coates is one of them. And just to kind of reiterate what Jake said from my perspective, he's really talking about this idea that as more as experienced trainers, and especially as trainers with some experience, a few years or whatever under your belt, it's really easy to get this tap into this culture of elitism where you all of a sudden, because you're knowledgeable, you feel really confident and you recognize that people around you don't necessarily feel as confident as you do. And so you feel good about it. And then your ego takes it and turns it into that extra little bit where like, it's like, oh, look at this asshole. It's like, and here's, I'll tell you where I fall into more than anything is I used to really love privately, of course, sending memes or whatever to friends or my dad or whoever, people who are in fitness and that are, they're like skip leg day, bro, memes, and they're really funny. They're great. But what we're doing is we're shaming people for working out the way they work out. You know what I'm saying? So, when we are talking about Andrew Coates and his contribution in this post, and I'm sure what he does, in a more broad way, it's really reminding those of us like Jake and I who have, I'd say we're moderately experienced trainers at this point. You've got more experience than I do, years wise, but we, we don't have, Andrew Coates. I think Andrew Coates is a little bit older than us, right?
I think he
I've,
is around the neighborhood of 40, if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken, or late 30s or something.
So even that, we're early 30s, he's late 30s, let's say, right? Even that difference, especially right between early 30s and late 30s, because people tend to do a lot of work in their 30s, right? You get a lot more experience and you learn a lot more things. So it's that kind of more experienced trainer, Andrew Coates, reminding moderately experienced trainers like you and me, Jake, that we need to remember to be kind to the brand new trainers, because it's not usually the people like Andrew Coates who've been doing it for 20 years who are snickering at the people who are new and learning. It's the people who have a few years under the belt and think they're hot shit, right? So Andrew Coates saying this is perfect because not only is he a source of authority within the space, but he's a source of authority to other sources of authority, other trainers. So if he can proliferate, if he can spread this word of goodwill and just get a couple people who are around our experience to remember that we're not hot shit and that we're going to keep learning and that we may be confident because we've built up some skills, but every day is a new day, right? And that gives us the opportunity to do the same thing for brand new trainers. And you can substitute in trainers here for gym goer, lifter,
Yep.
endurance athlete.
Yeah, and you said I totally forgot to mention that it's an ego thing. You said something
Mm-hmm.
about ego a few minutes ago. That's all it is. Like
Yep.
people all of a sudden, it actually reminded me of this. I heard this one time. It was actually a meme. It said, "Done CrossFit for 3 weeks. Thinks they're a Navy SEAL." That was
It's
what I wish I
real.
would have saved that one. But it's the same thing. Like people get a little bit of experience, their head gets a little bit bigger than it was before, and then has that attitude of I am better, which I don't really think that does any good, especially in this capacity or anything. So I'm glad you brought up ego because that's all it is. It's a ego thing, just something to please your own ego. So
I would like to touch on the fact too that a minute ago I was also being a touch modest. I put trainers into three categories: new, intermediate, and advanced. Jake and I are honestly probably in between. We're probably a little closer to the advanced, in between intermediate, advanced, than I purported us. So keep in mind that there's a big spectrum here. So you got to kind of not only be accepting of people who are early in their careers making mistakes, but you also got to be accepting of people who are moderately or farther in their careers. Because I'll tell you what, Andrew Coates is probably going to make a mistake tomorrow. Probably not tomorrow. He's going to make a mistake sometime in the future, but he probably has experience to own that mistake and make sure that people know that he has figured out the right next thing, right? So it's all a process, right?
Absolutely. And then moving on to a topic that's not quite so exciting to talk about, but nevertheless, it's still really important. And
Mm,
that is nutrient dense foods and why you should consume them. Clayton actually thought about talking about
my
this a
favorite.
week or so ago, and I just thought it was a fantastic idea. It's one of those not so sexy topics, but it's also really important though at the same
Mhm.
time. And when we say nutrient dense, we're just referring to the amount of beneficial nutrients in a food in relation to the energy, or aka the calories that food provides. There's a little bit more nuance than that, but that's what we'll stick with as far as the definition today. And then the CDC actually does rank some food and gives them like a numerical rating. But for today's purposes, we're not going to talk about that. And nutrient dense foods are what we call high in micronutrients. So this is your vitamins and minerals. It's all to help maintain your health and also for your body to be able to do a bunch of different physiological functions. So this is anything from maintaining your vision to having a healthy immune system. Hopefully you guys are still awake. I'm awake right now. I'm sure a few of
Mhm.
you are already asleep after that long little babble there about micronutrients. But examples though of some nutrient dense foods would be, say, broccoli or bell peppers or tomatoes, carrots, blueberries, things like this. So, for the amount of calories or the actual serving in them, there is a ton of vitamins, a ton of minerals. And what I love about it personally, Clay, because I have a ginormous appetite that is
Mhm.
almost not even human, when I eat things like this, it helps me feel more full and more satiated. It's
Oh
a
yeah.
it's a wonderful thing when you have an appetite like I do, when you can eat foods that assist you with feeling a little bit more full. Oh, also, not to get off topic here, but we've noticed my 2-year-old we think has my appetite. So I'm a little bit scared for her. She's always hungry. She's always running around,
Jake's a beast.
and so that's gonna be really funny to see.
I remember
Um,
since we were young, man, you've been a savage with food. I mean, you. I remember you and our other friend Brian would like have eat offs, and the rest of us would be like in a bite one. You guys would be arguing about who finished first.
dude, I remember my mom telling me too. She was like, "It's really good that you played a lot of sports because if not, with all that food you're eating, or
Yeah.
sorry, I think she said it more. She also said something like this, like, I can tell when you weren't in season with your sports. That's what
Yeah.
she would say, meaning I would gain weight pretty fast because my appetite didn't stop.
Same.
You know what
Same
I
here.
mean?
Same.
Just
When we
because
see
my
a,
sport. What was that?
oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say we see a lot. Like that's a pretty regular thing with athletes.
Oh, for sure. I mean, going from some of them, especially collegiate or professional level, where it's a full time job,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you're doing not nothing, but maybe just training like a normal human. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean your appetite necessarily is going to go way down too, maybe a little bit. But yeah, it's really easy to get carried away with the calories. But why are we saying this? Why are we talking about it? Well, the standard American diet, unfortunately, is very energy or calorie rich,
Mm-hmm.
but very nutrient poor. So most people
Mm-hmm.
do very well in consuming foods that are high in calories and pretty processed, which process that's not necessarily a bad thing all the time. But if that's all we're doing is consuming very high caloric foods that don't have a lot of nutrients that we want, probably not setting us up for success in the future. And then processed foods in and itself aren't bad,
Yeah.
but if that's all we consume, it's very easy to overconsume. I do think sometimes we can get a little bit carried away when we say processed food,
Yeah.
because most of the
Everything is
foods we eat
processed.
is processed at least to some degree, not
Yeah.
necessarily all of them, but a lot of them are. Like even just the other day, I was reminded, or not me personally, but I heard someone say, "Remember, whey protein is processed."
Right.
Clayton, I think that was
It,
actually a
it was
video you sent me.
those are the
Yeah,
garage
and I
strength
was like, "Oh
video.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly." I was like, yeah, that is so true. Whey protein is literally super processed. Does that mean it's terrible for you? No.
Right.
Does it mean that processed food in and itself is what is making people obese or gaining tons of weight? No.
Right.
But we do have to know when we eat something, for me, say like potato chips, I'm not going to stop. I'm eating 2 family-sized bags of those suckers. You know what I mean? So it sets us up to want to eat more. So it's not that they are
Mm-hmm.
necessarily bad. It's just very, very easy for some of us to overconsume. And it's safe to say for the general population of people, I would say it's smart to consume lots of nutrient dense foods and then eat the processed foods that you enjoy, but do so in moderation.
Yeah.
So the energy balance, what you are consuming versus what you are quote unquote burning, that's going to be more important for your weight than anything else. So eat your processed foods, eat foods you enjoy, do so in moderation, but make sure we're getting those whole foods, those nutrient
Mm-hmm.
dense, micronutrient dense packed foods.
I want to and I want to unpack. I want to unpack
Unpack.
processing real quick, because it's something that is a lot of people don't really. It's an elusive subject, especially when we're talking about processed foods, because we tend to think about processed foods being like these uber, like miracle meat. What's it called? I'm trying to draw them, but like what's
Spam. Wait, no,
no?
no,
I
no,
love
no.
spam's a good
Bologna,
example, but I was talking about the fake meat. Impossible Burger and
spam.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my
So
gosh, I already know what you're gonna say. Oh my
so
gosh.
so we have this idea, right, that these plant meats are gonna save the world, and absolutely, like, I'm not trying to touch on the environment, any of that stuff, but we have this idea that these plant-based meats are super healthy, but what these plant-based meats are they've taken a whole food, they've taken probably a few different whole foods, and they've chopped them up at such a fine level and remixed them together that they don't even, like, structurally, it's not even a natural substance, going into your body anymore. So what I'm saying is, that's how we get to the idea of processed foods being bad, right? Because we're taking a whole food, we're processing it, and in that processing we're losing a certain amount of nutritional value, whether that's macronutrients or micronutrients. In that process you lose value. So the question is, and Jake touched on this, how do we turn this into usable information? Because as Jake touched on, processed food doesn't mean it's bad. We take whey protein, we give whey protein to athletes to put muscle on, you know what I mean? Then that's highly processed. But those same athletes are most likely eating whole foods as the majority of their nutritional input, right? So when we're talking about processed food, I think it's good to work backwards, saying what same question we eat all the time. And Jake, you said this: what are we eating and why? If you want to eat that mad processed, those potato chips or the spam or whatever, do that. But then you get some good whole foods to fuel yourself. Just enjoy those processed foods, like Jake's talking about, right? But when we're talking about fueling yourself, you want to get stuff that's actually gonna give you those micronutrients, give you, um, you know, proper macronutrient and proper macronutrient balance overall. Um, food is not created equal. We know that now. Processing does not mean bad. We know that now. So, what is good? Nutrient density. Get that fuel, baby.
That's right. And I'm not huge into challenges like 30-day get shredded, like any of that stuff. I'm normally not into it. That's probably more accurate. But one that I do love, and I'll probably say it, time and time again on the show, is a EC Sinkowski from Optimize Me Nutrition create the 800-gram challenge, and that is you eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables a day. That's it. And there's simplicity to it. And at the same time, I feel it can benefit almost anyone that does it. Because most people, if you do that challenge, if you eat the 800 grams of fruits and vegetables every day and do it for a month, you're going to notice that you probably aren't getting very, very many fruits and vegetables in every day. And I tried it before. My gym tried it, years and years ago. And I'm someone that I would consume fruits and veggies every day anyway, but after doing that, man, I felt way better. There's just this different type of energy I feel like you have when you
Mm.
start consuming all these nutrient dense foods. And the other thing I love, it's not technically say a fat loss challenge, but people trying to lose weight. Clayton, it's the that thing you mentioned a week or two ago that I loved. It's the adding before subtracting. There's
Mm.
psychology to it. Like, okay, you don't necessarily tell someone you can't eat any of this. That's not the point of the challenge, but eat all this stuff. That's going to be the priority. And because you're doing that, you're probably going to eat a lot less of the higher calorie processed food. So it's a cool little effect. And also, I just like the psychology behind it too. So I think it's great.
I'd really love to touch on the psychology on the other side of that too, because what you just touched on this is the psychology of your body now recognizing when it's getting the proper nutrients and it being happy about that, and a cascading set of effects and events that come from that. The other side of the token is true. When we're eating those highly processed foods that are designed to trick our brain into thinking that they're getting nutrients, your brain is like, come on, let's keep doing it, because it's recognizing that it's eating, but it's not getting the nutrients that it needs. So it, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, sends you off in a cyclical, a cycle of behavior that is ultimately keeping on putting poor nutrient, poorly, what do you say, nutrient poor food in your face in order to try to feel better about your lack of nutrients. So it's a cycle that begets more and more discomfort and pain and hunger, even when we're trying to fix it, right? So the other side of that token is what Jake just said. Make sure you get those nutrients. This 800 grams of fruit and veggies sounds genius, because you're just getting, and I'm sure within that there's a broad range of colors and sources,
Exactly.
right? And so you're gonna get all this stuff, and your body's gonna be like, oh, like this is so great, and it's not gonna want to go back to eating freaking potato chips by themselves, because they're just gonna recognize that that's bullshit, you know?
And I will say one thing. This is my own anecdote. I don't know if there's any research on this or anything this specifically, but I do notice if I start straying away from fruits and veggies and having those be in my normal diet every day, and I start leaning toward the more uh, foods like the more processed foods we were talking about, like chips and things like that, right?
Mm.
The more I lean that way, the less that I want fruits and veggies. It's really weird. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, when I'm like, okay, my body needs carbohydrates, instead of, okay, I'm going to eat an apple or I'm going to have whatever fruit it is, I feel like, oh no, I want potato chips. I
Yeah.
want these sugary processed type of things. It's very weird. I don't know the exact phenomenon with that, but I have noticed that the more I eat the higher processed foods, the least that I feel like fruits and veggies. They all of a sudden they don't, the appeal isn't the same. And then when I go to eat it, it doesn't, it's not the same. It's not as enjoyable. Now, if I go the other way for a little while and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, I don't need to eat potato chips every day. It does me no benefit. And I start eating more, fruits and veggies and whatever it is, all of a sudden, all that stuff tastes just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just that fine balance for me. So I don't know if anyone's experienced that too. Maybe it's just a
Well, I mean,
behavior type of thing and psychological type thing. But I do notice that when I start eating, especially I'm gonna keep saying potato chips because that's just something I can overeat, all day long. When I do that, I don't want to eat fruits and veggies as much.
it's weird, you know, and I likewise am now speaking just from off the top of my head, not with any kind of backing knowledge, but it seems like um in my own anecdotal experience as well, because I empathize with that. As I shift, I absolutely, like, I start craving those other things. It's got to have something to do with stimulating the reward circuit in your brain, and that kind of hedonistic behavior drive, because it's it's interesting how we can shift from really quality behaviors to really to behaviors that really beget us pain based on that stimulation of that reward circuit. And what I mean is there's actual studies that show that rats, when addicted to cocaine, will continue to press. So the experiment that I'm thinking of, and I'd have to look it up to reference it properly, but they basically they got these rats addicted to cocaine, but the way they did it was every time the rat would hit a lever, they would get a hit of the cocaine. Basically, I think they were stimulating the brain, but it was so actually I think it was they were stimulating the reward circuit. Maybe I'm mixing up two studies, but the idea was that an addicted rat will continue to hit the lever for the cocaine release over eating. Like the rats will continue to go for the cocaine hit at the expense of dying because they're wasting away. So when we start talking about foods that are designed to stimulate our reward circuit, all of a sudden we get into psychologically the arena of, okay, so are we rats hitting that cocaine button? And that's what our a big, I mean, an oversimplified version of it, but that's a big part of our cultural phenomenon with obesity in America, which is we have these cocaine buttons everywhere. You know, McDonald's is, I can walk out of my house and I can smell In-N-Out. You know what I mean? Like we have all these triggers getting ready for us. They're saying, hey, it's time to eat. It's time to eat. And we're like, okay, it's time to eat. But we're not actually fueling ourselves. And it goes right back to the same thing we were just talking about. We're stimulating our reward circuit, not fueling our body.
Yeah, and it's one of those topics I'm very excited to hopefully obtain more information with over the course of time and in the future to come, because they've shown in data and in literature that food isn't addictive, at least in the way that we view the word addictive,
Mm-hmm.
but it does feel like that. The way you were describing that, it is kind of how it feels like when you're eating highly processed foods.
Right.
Back to potato chips again for the 100th time today. So it does feel like that. It's a similar type of sensation.
It's important that we recognize at this point that academically studied addiction and so what you're talking about, my guess would be that that's about how addictive, quote unquote, it is from a clinical standpoint. But, you know, from a clinical standpoint, gambling's not addictive. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it probably is, but sorry, that's a bad way to say it. I believe, and I think that this is backed by research, but I don't have anything at my disposal right now, that pretty much anything can become addictive, right? Addiction is a processing and a behavior that is a complex psychological thing that's going on, right? So when we're talking about addiction, obviously heroin, cocaine, they have a physiologically addictive, process, but behaviorally and psychologically addictive, that is a whole different beast that we're not equipped to talk about here, but these are things that we are discussing on the spectrum. And, as we both, Jake and I said, we've been talking now mostly like just thinking out loud. We're not coming to you presenting this very specific information as we typically do on our podcast. We're kind of speculating at this point.
But I do agree with you with the, like, psychologically there's at least similarities, like in behaviors, but then chemically though obviously it's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do hope there's more literature that does come out in the future with that. I've seen, that's another thing I've seen people argue about online about food being addictive or not. Um, Similarities in behavior, sure. And then I guess we'll just see what comes from there.
Well, so I want to be clear that I'm not saying, I'm not making a statement one way or another about the addictiveness of food. What I'm saying is that whether we're talking about addiction or we're talking about consuming food, when we're talking about that hedonistic response, meaning our response to pleasurable activities, that naturally pleasurable activities can become addictive regardless of their viability for
Mm,
chemical addiction.
yeah, I
So
like that.
yeah, so it is really more of a broad point about saying that addiction is a beast that we couldn't even begin to approach in this podcast. And more, I'm bringing it up for the sake of acknowledging that when we eat shitty processed foods, our reward circuit is being stimulated, and that is a that kind of dopamine rush and neurotransmitter release is something that can drive a person to continue to do that behavior, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's really the point of it.
Per- and perfect transition into our Q&A for the day, which is, does the keto diet do what
Mm-hmm.
it says? And it seems people like to get addicted to different
Mm-hmm.
types of fad diets, so this is a perfect one to end on. So
Totally.
does the keto diet do what it says it does? So let's do a quick overview of keto. Generally speaking, we're referring to a high fat, adequate protein, and then low carb diet. That's the main point there, the high fat and low carb. And so what happens after you eat low carb for a while, your body will start to convert fat into fatty acids and ketones, hence the name ketogenic diet, excuse me, and then utilize that for energy. And people mainly take this approach doing the keto diet for weight loss or fat loss. That's the main reason that someone would do this diet. So what happens in the beginning stages, because people get very excited with the fast weight loss from keto.
Mm-hmm.
So when your body has carbohydrates, so you consume some of the carbohydrates, it gets broken down to sugar in your body and then stored in what is called glycogen. Glycogen is stored in your muscles and your liver, and when there is 1 gram of that glycogen that is stored there in your muscles or liver, you are also retaining water with that, somewhere around 3 grams. So per 1 gram glycogen, there's normally about 3 grams of water or so. So when you go low carb, after a little while, say a week, you are losing tons of water weight. So it's not that first 2 weeks you lost 15
Mm-hmm.
pounds of fat. You might have lost a little bit of body fat, but it's mainly water. So yes, technically keto does very well in the beginning as far as losing weight, but for fat loss, it's a little bit different of a story. And I want to go over a common misconception. Wow, I can't talk today,
Mm-hmm.
about the keto diet. And I hear this a lot when people try to make the argument that insulin is the sole reason why you can or cannot lose weight. Like eating carbohydrates spikes your insulin, meaning you can put on body fat very easily, not dependent on calories. So here's the common misconception here is when you consume more fat, like you're doing with keto, right? You're consuming more fat, your body is burning more fat, but it's not because this magical thing. It's because you're consuming more fat. Now, if you take the inverse of that, someone that consumes a high carbohydrate type of diet, you might not be burning as much fat, but you aren't taking in as much fat either. So, in the end, energy balance is what is going to make you lose weight or not.
Yeah.
That's going to be, sorry, the main concern as far as losing weight. So it's not magic doing the keto diet. It can help you lose weight. Absolutely. A lot of that being water weight, especially in the beginning. It's the calorie deficit. So consuming or burning more calories than you are consuming, that's going to be the main factor. Of course, the burning part, a lot of things affect that, like your sleep, your stress, tons of other things affect that, your protein intake. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be energy balance being king as far as fat loss. So, yes, does it do what it says? Sure. It can assist you in your fat loss goals if you like to eat that way. I can't see most people wanting to do that for the
Yeah.
rest of their life. And generally speaking, if we're talking to the everyday person, if you decide that you want to lose body fat, it's probably a better approach to do something that's sustainable and that you can see yourself doing for the rest of your life. Uh, I know we always have a caveat with that, unless there's some competition, like you're doing some sport and it's based on your weight, anything like that. But I'm talking mainly about the everyday person. It's more of, okay, can I see myself eating like this for the rest of my life? If you can't, it might not be optimal for you to do something extreme like the keto diet. Another thing too, there has been studies with this and showing that keto, although yes, you can gain muscle if you do the keto diet, of course, it's not the optimal way to gain muscle when comparing to more of a more balanced diet, even with calories equated. One cool thing about keto, and I think there's more literature coming out with this. I think that this is what I think is pretty cool about it, is the therapeutic effects, and this can be with children with
Yeah,
epilepsy,
super
and
cool.
then helping reduce seizures. So I've seen some data showing that it does help with that a lot, which is fantastic. And
Mm.
then there's been data suggesting the potential for it helping with Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, and then different sleep disorders. So it's cool to think maybe in the future it could do something like that. So I see it as more of a type of a way to eat as a therapeutic effect for some of these conditions. And of course, I'm not recommending you do that for these conditions. I'm just saying what I've seen through some data that it's pointing that way, that it can help with those things. So keto, it is not magic. It is probably not for everyone. And most people would do better with the balanced diet.
Absolutely. Jake just said it all, but I'm just gonna reiterate what I thought was important from there, which was or I wouldn't say what I reiterate what I thought was important. Where I see people take the most mistakes with this is thinking that it's a long term sustainable strategy. And so I guess you did. I just double checked myself, but you did mention this, and the idea that we can use this tool to stay fit in perpetuity is the mistake because of all the reasons Jake just said. This is a tool for somebody who, for example, is very obese and wants to have a big win right up front. That's a great tool for that. You know what I'm saying? But the key to that is once you go through that period where you have that big win up front and you feel better because, it's a lot of water weight loss, but, you feel that weight loss, right? Then it's time that we start fueling the body appropriately for the needs and for long-term sustainability. It doesn't do us any good to use this tool to lose a bunch of weight if we can't stick to it for whatever reason, and then we return back to the way that we were eating before. So anytime, and this is not just keto, but anytime that you're talking about, especially a fad diet, but any kind of new thing that's out, keep in mind that these are tools to accomplish a goal. And the tool is keto, and the goals are the things Jake just said. And a very small part of that was actually losing weight, and a zero part of it was creating a long-term sustainable lifestyle. So it comes back to the questions we always ask. What are you doing and why? Do you want to do a couple months of eating high fat, low carb, adequate protein, and then transition into something more realistically sustainable? Kill it, guy or lady, whatever, or non gender defined, non binary person, kill it. You know what I'm saying? But most people see the results that folks get from keto, and they're saying, "Oh, there's the secret. There's the easy way that has been kept secret from me that I didn't know about all this time. Now that I know about it, I can find those results." But what they don't show you is that same person a year later. Sometimes they're going to look really good, and they kept on, they maintained that weight loss and they gained strength and continued to lose fat weight, but guaranteed that person who did that used more than just keto to make that happen. They used fitness, they used probably a combination of nutrients, and they probably had guidance that showed them that keto should only be used in that short term, or, you know, as a tool depending on your circumstance, right? Because obviously, like Jake said, there are people here like if you're getting help reducing seizures based on taking keto or doing, you know, having keto diet, you don't give a sure what your body weight looks like. You're stoked you don't have, you know, you're not having seizures, you know what I mean? So it always comes back to what are we doing and why? And, you know, keto, we tend to use that. We tend to think that that's a lifestyle change, and it's not. It's a temporary tool.
And if body fat reduction is your goal, uh, probably the best long-term approach and for sustainability is which way to be in a calorie deficit is going to be easiest for you, quote unquote
Mm,
easiest, and what can you adhere to.
yeah,
And I'm very
absolutely.
confident in saying this isn't the way for most people.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. Do what you feel is easiest that you can adhere to and helps you reach your goals. But for most people, I know no one wants to hear it, but the slower approach is normally going to be better for more people where you are more balanced. You might not lose all that weight right away, but that's okay if this is something that you're looking to do in the long term.
A lot of people, you know, it's easy to focus on that idea that like, oh, you know, oh, but I just wanted to get it done and not worry about sustainability. But I'll tell you what, if you lose all the weight and then you gain all that weight back, you're going to be thinking about sustainability. And let me tell you, that's just someone who has firsthand experience of that. And you know, now I seek um, state I seek homeostasis. I seek some I seek homeostasis. I seek stasis. I seek stability over gains, because stability is going to be long term gains for me, whereas gains, as we think about them, might mean me stopping for whatever reason in a couple weeks. So really, what's true gains, right? Little incremental bits that you can build over time, and you look up and your life is changed and stable, or jumping back and forth between being 100, you know, 250 pounds and 200 pounds.
Yep, absolutely. All right, everyone. If you enjoyed the episode and you're enjoying our content, please subscribe to the show if you haven't. And if you liked it that much, go ahead and leave us a review. It's going to help us grow tremendously and be greatly appreciated. You can find us on Instagram at Mission Driven Made. Also, we have a free platform on Facebook, a fitness community called The Forum. So if you go to Facebook and type in Mission Driven Made, The Forum, you can find us there. And this is a place where other listeners of the podcast can converse. And it's also a place you can go to ask Clayton or I any fitness related questions that you would like. And we'd love to be there to assist you. And like I said, it's completely free. We're also going to put a link in the show notes for it. All right, everyone, we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, stay mission driven.
All right, Twitch viewers, now's your chance. You got any live Q&A questions? You got Jake and I for live Q&A. This is gonna be a quick, momentary wait, because both Jake and I are gonna move on to the rest of our days, since we don't typically have folks doing the Q&A. But make sure that if you do, shout out in chat, or you know, reach out over Instagram or Facebook or one of those other things for us. Okay. Yeah. Until then, we'll see you guys later.